Welcome to GynoCurious. I'm your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we have examined what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Today, I am filled with gratitude, a bit of awe, and continued curiosity. This is our 100th episode, 100 conversations, 100 moments of vulnerability, insight, learning, and laughter. When I started GynoCurious, I had no idea where it was going to take me. I knew I wanted to explore the intersections of medicine, healing from many perspectives, emotions, sexuality, relationships, identity, and the complex, always remarkable experience of being in a human body. Along the way, we've heard from clinicians, survivors, folks thinking about women's health and policy, coaches teaching us about mindfulness, the breath, and the many varied ways in which we all seek our personal wellness and pleasures. Mothers, daughters, and sisters have been in the studio sharing their stories, suffused with wisdom, integrity, and grit. I have learned from all of my guests. I am so grateful they were willing to share their stories with all of us. The number 100 carries weight. It's a milestone. It also speaks to accumulation, to the power of listening episode by episode until something quietly shifts, to giving space for nuance, for different ways of knowing, for stories that don't always get told. So today I want to pause to say thank you. Whether you've been here since the beginning or just tuned in last week, GynoCurious exists because of you, the listeners, the question askers, the brave, the skeptical, the healing, and the hopeful. Keep listening with me. Please, let's all stay curious together. And let's keep finding new ways to talk about our bodies, illness, power, love, and health with compassion, courage, and clarity. So today we're going to shake things up a little bit because we are celebrating. For our 100th episode, my guest, Carla Goldstein, is flipping the script and asking me the questions. Carla is a friend, a mentor, a fellow thinker, feminist, and seeker. As long as I've known her, which is a long time now, she has been deeply curious about the human experience and the world around us. Carla is the president and CEO of Omega Institute, a nonprofit retreat center at the forefront of holistic education. She's also the co-founder of the Omega Women's Leadership Center, a hub for convening, inspiring, and training women to do power differently. Her daily work explores the intersections of mind, body, and spirit, and how we move through the world with integrity and intention. Before her time at Omega, Carla, an attorney, worked in public interest advocacy and in city and state governments, where she focused on driving cultural change to strengthen our communities, both locally and nationally. She brings deep wisdom and compassion to every conversation I have with her, at least. And I can't think of a better person to join me today, especially as we reflect on what it means to find our voices, learning to listen deeply, how to lead, and ways to be healed. Carla, welcome to GynoCurious.
Thank you so much, Amy. Oh my goodness, 100 episodes.
I know.
Wow.
I am so excited, and I must admit, feeling a little vulnerable having the mic turned around. So how would you like to begin this celebration?
You know, I guess I'd love to hug you, but we're not going to do that here.
And I'm going to warn you, I might cry today. I don't know. I'm feeling rather emotional.
Well, actually, you know, when I think about our friendship, you cried early, and that cemented it. And when I remember that moment, actually, we were on a long walk. We had just met, and you started to cry. I hope it's okay. I'm telling this story.
Of course.
But what you were crying about was, I think, the hope and promise of our friendship and intimacy, and how challenging it can be for women to actually find each other and trust each other. And that when we do that, that can bring up like a lot of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And when you shared that with me, I'm like, okay, I'm yours forever. That's
Yay.
it. But I think one of the ways I want to start is by saying that I have been on both sides of your speculum. And, when we met, somebody had given me your number. My aunt actually had given me your phone number and said, there's this amazing physician who actually listens and cares about women and is a specialist in women of our age. And she gave me your number, and it sat like on a little yellow sticky for a very long time, waiting for me to call you. And finally I did. And I got into your office, and all the promises were totally there plus more. You listened deeply to my story. You spent time. I think I was with you for 45 minutes, and you gave me amazing advice. And then the next thing that happened, because we live in a small town, is that I had just moved to the small town. I found myself at the spaghetti dinner for the school. And I'm looking around the room at who might I approach and talk to? And I see you, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's my gynecologist. Am I allowed to approach her? And I did. And I said, hey, how does this work in a small town? And you said, well, actually, most of the women in this room are probably my patients. It's really up to you if you want to be friends or if you want to pretend like you've never seen me. And thus began our relationship. So it's been well over 20 years on both sides. You were my doctor. Then I decided, no, please be my friend. And my first question for you is, what has it been like to take care of a town, of the women in the town, and kind of navigating these friendships, careships, privacy, public connection? What has that been like for you?
Ooh, complex. A privilege, daunting, frustrating, wonderful, all these things. There's so much of an overlap.
Mm.
And I think I said it on another GynoCurious episode. I was saying how kind of wonderful it is to be a little bit of a celebrity. It's as close to a celebrity as I've ever been, where I walk into a restaurant and the maitre d' is someone I might know, and they're like, oh, we'll find you a table. And I was like, ooh, isn't this fancy and great? Because I've never had that in my life. And then, of course, there's the times where I'm in the grocery store and I barely have my hair combed and I'm rushing between childcare and my job and everything else I do in my life. And women come up and start telling me about their pap smear results and when their next appointment is. And with great love and adoration for these women, I realize, oh, I'm available to them. And part of me just doesn't want to be available to them because the private and the personal space that I have has been so limited over the years. And particularly when my kids were young. So I kind of needed to protect that. So complex. At the same time, seeing people I know, I have kind of it's kind of a game, I guess I'd say, or this maybe it's just a strategy is a better word for it. So when I see someone I know them on a professional level, first of all, I never initiate the hello. I always allow them to either avoid me or say hello or engage with me. I never use anybody's first name, although I must admit often it's because I don't remember their name. I meet so many women. But mostly it's out of protecting their privacy. And I feel so strident about that. And it's so important to me. So it's just an interesting opportunity. And again, mostly it's just a privilege. And I've learned how to maneuver it. And I like to think I do it successfully. I hope I've done it respectfully. So mostly it's worked. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've had the privilege of walking down the street with you and watching that interaction. Either people like, let me tell you my whole story and my results, or like averting their eyes and you keep walking.
Right.
What in 100 shows? So you're in a kind of a different room now, right? All of those years when you were practicing in an office. There was a lot of privacy. You were in a very intimate setting. And now here you are, still intimate. We're alone in a room with Jen, the producer, but it's intimate, but yet you are talking to the public. And I'm curious about how that difference of doctoring, of interviewing people, of bringing your wisdom and your care out in a public forum. How does that feel different than what you did in the exam room?
Yeah. I kind of feel like I have to start from the beginning insofar as how did I get here? So I was invited to be a guest on another podcaster's through Radio Free Rhinecliff. And Kitty Pilgrim, who's a seasoned journalist, asked me to come in twice. And afterwards, Jen and Maddie, the producers and the folks who make this program happen, came up to me and asked me if I wanted to do a podcast. And I don't know if Jen remembers this conversation. I do. I was like, are you kidding me? Ha 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 ha. What a joke. No way. Oh, wait. There's like instrumentation here. I can't figure out a microphone. I can't do the recording. They're like, no. We'll take care of that. I'm like, I still don't know how to do podcasting. So I called my kids and I said to them, you want to hear something funny? I've been asked to do my own podcast, and independent of one another, because they live on both sides of the country, they both said, well, why wouldn't you, Mom? I didn't expect that question. I said, well, because I don't know how. And quite frankly, it terrifies me. I'm really good at the quiet, insular space of the office, but speaking out loud, that's a new voice for me. And they're like, that's why you have to do it. They were just so clear that because I was afraid, I needed to face my fears. And so here I am celebrating with them and you and Jen and my audience this 100th episode because I really didn't know what to make of it. So transitioning from the office to here, what I've realized is that I've spent over 35 years interviewing women, talking to women, listening to their stories. And that's been my favorite part of my practice. Yes, I like to treat women. I've loved operating and taking care of problems for them, the immediacy of those treatments. But what's made my practice so nuanced and so special and so rewarding is deep listening. And so when I started doing it here on the podcast, it was a natural progression that I just never identified until in kind of almost recently. It was like, aha. And so what I don't know, Carla, whether I would have been able to do this even 10 years ago, because part of also what's happened with so many of us who are of a certain age is that I've also gotten to a point where I don't care as much about how people think of me or about me, that the judgments out there don't impact me in the same way that they used to when I was a new practitioner for sure. But even, again, maybe even 10 years ago. And I've always worked within an academic setting or a corporate setting where judgment was all around me. And I've just gotten to a point now where, I make mistakes on this podcast. Some of my interviews are not so dynamic. Some of them are. But in a way, that's part of the process and the way I'm learning. And in a way, the lesson that I want to teach to my audience, that perfection is elusive, that healing and illness is all part of a continuum, just like my learning, and that I'm only one voice, and that the stories that women are sharing with me as guests are so, so important and vital to bringing their truths to a forum where hopefully many are listening. And I'm just bearing witness. I'm just here to help them create a platform in which their truths can be shared and where their voices can be heard as well. Because I think for so many women, we feel like imposters. We don't feel like we can tell our stories out loud. We don't reach a point until maybe this middle age where we begin to say, I don't give a shit anymore. I am just going to say what I think respectfully, honestly, with integrity. And for me, with as much science and information as I can. So it's been a fascinating journey. That was a very long-winded answer. I apologize.
No apologies.
Yeah.
No apologies. It was a beautiful answer. And gives us a lot of territory. It
Mm.
prompts about 17 questions. So I'm going to try to get them out. Question one is really about your voice, because you're so committed, right, to creating this platform for other women's voices and stories. And you started this podcast saying you're a little nervous because we're flipping it around. And you and I have had many conversations about the safety of being the doctor on the other side of the speculum versus being the patient, and like the vulnerability that flips back and forth. So I do want to talk about your voice journey. You and I have spent so much time talking about this. And I know that many years ago, we worked together, starting writing together. You were looking to find kind of your voice. And part of what you've written about is what happened to your voice in your medical training. So I'd like to spend a little time, if you can trace the journey of your voice a little bit for us. Like, what drove you to medical school in the first place? What happened to you in medical school? How did that experience shape your path as a physician and then bring you to this platform? Like, kind of maybe in those 4 chapters, like your voice, it is the beauty of age that we can shed some of that, like serving everybody else and worrying about what everybody else thinks. So that's the gift. So here we are. But how, in addition to aging, did you get to this place of voice, let's call it voice liberation?
Yeah. Practice, a lot of practice. But let me start. When I think about how my voice has been used over time, I have to kind of go back a long ways. My father was a grammarian. He was very strict about how language was used. And he was a very nice man, but he was extremely dogmatic about how we spoke, not only from the perspective of being polite and as a woman, in a way, seen more than heard, but also literally how my sentence structure was. I still remember the big red, bold, lines over my writing, not good enough, not good enough. So there was that. And I remember when I first went off to college feeling very nervous about speaking out loud because, heaven forbid, I used the wrong grammar, or even my writing. I didn't have my father with me to, correct everything. So it was a very slow migration and evolution in college. And I actually, I've mentioned this before in GynoCurious, I always thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And I think it just occurred to me, part of that may have been because I didn't really want to use my voice in the same way. And one doesn't with animals. And I only stopped wanting to be a veterinarian my last year of college for a variety of reasons. One, I was kind of bored, quite frankly, because I think I began to realize I really like to talk and I had things to say. And there were people around me who were affirming that what I had to say had some value and significance. So I shifted. I kind of gave up the dream of being a veterinarian, and I spent 3 years working in the city. And interestingly enough, I studied voice. I was a singer. So I knew how to sing, but I didn't really know how to talk in the same bold way with my strong alto and, using my diaphragm with my breath and all of that. I wasn't as engaged. So 3 years later, I decided to go to medical school after working in a hospital, at the VA hospital in Manhattan, and realizing I, again, love to talk to patients. I loved being in the hospital environment. There was something about it that I just loved the community. And I knew from an early age I needed to be a healer of some sort. So when I went to medical school, I was slightly older than the majority of the students. But I was a strong student, but I wasn't excellent. And my brain, my mind was not one who memorized things really well. And the trick during medical school was memorization. It was learn, memorize, regurgitate. That was the strategy for passing. And I passed, but it was a struggle. The way I thought always is about kind of this way of integrating, of looking at things in a very global way, a larger way. And that served me common sense has always been kind of a strong part of who I am. Common sense is not always a part of medical training, paradoxically. And so during medical school, I remained rather quiet. I was not the student who raised her hand. I did not answer, questions from the teachers. I learned quietly. And it was okay. It served me. It felt safe. And then I got to residency, and residency was really, really hard on so many levels. Again, I've mentioned this on GynoCurious. It's not just the lack of sleep. It's not the bad food that I ate for 4 years. It wasn't the fact that almost every single one of the attendees or the older teachers, the doctors who were teaching us, were men, white men who were misogynistic. I mean, were they all? Of course not. There were several who were just lovely people and great teachers, but the culture of the place was a patriarchy. And this was not only towards me as a resident, but also the patients. And so from a very early point on, I felt I not only had to kind of protect myself, but I felt like I had to protect the patients too, who were completely voiceless. In the throes of labor, there are very few women who have the wherewithal to say, hey, stop doing what you're doing, or I don't like how I'm feeling here, or you're hurting me. And so it was only over the 4 years that I kind of learned how to speak out loud, but it was through a lot of hardship. I remember it was my second year of residency, and I was at the University of Pennsylvania, and we did a rotation there in my residency. And I was with a whole bunch of other residents. There were like 25 of us standing around speaking to an attending. And the attending asked a question. The question, to this day, I'll never forget. He asked, does anyone here think that there's some value to having a doula or a midwife at a labor and delivery? And without even thinking, I raised my hand, which was not something I typically did. I usually stood in the way back, and I'm short in stature, so it was great. I could get lost in the group. But I raised my hand because I intuitively knew the answer. Not only intuitively, but I knew I had read some studies that demonstrated the value of a doula or a midwife during labor and delivery, that it reduced C-section rates, that it reduced second stage of labor, that it overall had an amazing impact on women and their deliveries. So I said my spiel, and the attending looked at me and said, well, what journal did you see that in? And I kind of shrugged. I said, I'm sorry, I don't remember. Does anybody else remember what page it was, what date it was, who the author was? And I remember feeling like all of the information that I had just provided was negated because I couldn't remember, I couldn't cite the citation. And rather than him saying, Amy, you're right, that is in fact what the data shows, he basically overlooked me, went on to spout where it had come from, and, moved on. And I just remember realizing that the way I processed information was not valued. It couldn't be seen. It couldn't be heard. It was shortly after that I thought I was going to quit, because it was just, there were so many instances of just being silenced, of ridiculed, of humiliation, of shame. And I wasn't the only one. There were, certainly others, but I was incredibly sensitive around it because I had a feeling I knew what I was talking about. I mean, I did know what I was talking about. And that was demonstrated by a lower C-section rate, less infection in my postoperative patients, reviews from my patients that were kind and supportive and better than many other residents. But again, no one was looking at that. They wanted me to memorize. So I think it was just practice and learning somehow that the patriarchy was not going to define me. And a good therapist, a really good therapist, helped me along. She was able to give me some tools in which to kind of protect myself, so I wasn't going to feel so injured every single time someone didn't listen to me. So I just began to realize that my voice had, well, that my silence was not my natural state. It wasn't fitting me. And it was in a way more work than speaking out loud. So something magical happened. I think it was just a crystallization of what I learned in therapy, age, practice, a certain rebellious nature that was just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. That I had been kind of a silent feminist and I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I kind of had to have a breakthrough and stomp my feet and start speaking out loud. So in my third year, I also remember that during my years in residency, I could be fired. My job was not a given. If I acted out, if I, got in a way with somebody who had real power over me, I could lose my job. And I knew that if I lost that job, I'd never become a doctor. So there was a lot at stake. There was a lot at stake. So I don't know. It was, through a lot of physical shaking and anger and insecurity. It was a slow but steady process that brought me to my adult practice and to GynoCurious. And it's, part again of why I'm doing this is because I want everyone to hear this storyline, because again, I think I'm not alone and that there are kind of some universal truths to my experience. And if those who are listening who are younger than I am can process this faster, please do. Time, practice, rebellion, rage, respect for myself, kindness, and loving friends and loving family. All were part of it. Community. Yeah, had to be there. Had to be there.
What a journey of triumph and evolution and growth.
Mm-hmm.
The way you describe it, this growing, coming to yourself, sounds a little bit like a sense of calling. Calling to listen to women, calling to care for women, calling to serve women. Just curious if that's how you experienced it. Is calling a word that you could put on top of your experience? And the second part of the question is, you were talking earlier about how deeply gratifying it has been to listen to women's stories. And why is that? What related to the calling, what is it about women's stories, their differences and their similarities, that gives you so much gratification, satisfaction in hearing them, listening to them, holding them?
Because there's always something important said. Some of our language is vapid and doesn't hold a lot of meaning. But for whatever reason, no matter who is telling me, sharing their story with me, in whatever way it might be very linear, it might be all over the map, everyone speaks in a different way. There's always something said that not only instructs me as a human being and as a professional, so I learn something in terms of healing people, but there's also something universal about all their stories that comes in over and over and over again. So for selfish reasons, I learn from it. It also, it helps me identify my own foibles and my own failings and my own weaknesses and my own fears and my own strengths and my own healing journeys. So there's just a sharing that is so rich and exciting and challenging and nuanced. And I like people's quirks. I think the quirkier, the better, because it's a life fully lived. So calling, it's not a word I had ever heard as a kid or even as a young adult, quite frankly. I think I saw it certainly in books that I read, and I read a lot. I was a voracious reader, and it was often about women, whether it was fictional or nonfiction. And calling is a word that I absolutely use now. That again, I referred to kind of in the place of origin, kind of to be seen and not heard, that I have never actually been clearer in my gut, in my bones, that what I do is a calling. So every time I was ready to quit during my residency, something, again, I don't think I call it a calling then. I just called it probably a job, a means of paying the bills, something I felt committed to. I'm a little bit persistent. I'm very persistent and stubborn, all these things, right? That I was not a quitter. But now I was still all those things, but it's really about a deep, deep sense of I'm just here to witness. That is what I'm here to do. And I think there's a lot of ways that we bear witness. I think you bear witness in your work. I think Jen, who's here in the studio, bears witness to how I've evolved as a podcaster. And the medical work I've done with women is all about bearing witness, holding space, helping them find their voice. And I'm not talking about as being a savior. I'm not, that's not my job. That's not who I am. That's not part of my experience. It's really about, in a way, just being a scaffold, just a way in which to hold their experiences, stories, fears, wants, pleasures, all of that.
So beautiful.
Did that answer this?
It did.
I'm kind of getting lost in my own answers, I must admit.
It's so beautiful. Resonates as true because I know you. I'm like, yeah. That's right on. I would like to ask you now, like you're talking about witnessing and being a container and all these things. Let's talk about healing. You said, I have always known I'm a healer. And now you've just said, I think my role is as a witness, part of the calling to hold people to be a space for somebody else's healing to come through. And healing is a really complicated idea. And you have been a medical doctor using technology, using all of the hard skills you learned in medical school. How would you define healing? And how do you make sense of an integrated approach to healing? Like we've talked about the two sides of the speculum. And I recently said to you, it's kind of like, what about a telescope? Like if you telescope out into the universe, like there's so much going on all the time at any one moment that has a bearing on our well-being. You could stop. Well, are we feeling well now because of the temperature in the room? Are we feeling well now because of our blood sugar levels? Whatever. You could just go out and out and out into the universe. And then on the other side of the speculum, you can go in and in and in and in into the interior, into the interior of somebody's body. So talk to us a little bit about your definition of healing, your approach to healing, and the promise of healing.
Yes, it is complex. So I'll just share my experience around it. So the word I think I've used several times in this conversation is it's a process, that it is a continuum, that I've always felt that conventional medicine has always seen healing as an endpoint. I don't. I think that we're constantly moving in and out of health, ill health, understanding, lack thereof, that my work has always been kind of in between space between science and soul, structure and story, evidence and intuition. And that's not always been an easy place. In fact, it's always been a hard place. So from the perspective of working in the confines in which I've worked, conventional medicine has no interest in intuition, has no interest in psyche, has no interest in intuition. It doesn't. It's the scientific method, which I absolutely value and is important. I know a lot of stuff, and that stuff has been really important to helping women be well. But what's so important for me is understanding that every woman's experience in healing and my participation in that, it's not linear. It's it's very deeply personal. Certainly sometimes women come in with, very little concerns, and their story is very it's a very comfortable one. Others come in and they have a lot on their mind, and there's a lot going on in their body, and they're connected. And part of what I do is help them connect what's going on in their mind and what's going on in their body, because so often we as individuals don't recognize those connections. Not because we aren't aware that there's a connection, but we're just, we've got 4 million balls in the air. So I don't always know that my neck pain is about the fact that I'm worried about my kids, or that my back pain is about my job is asking too much of me. The burden is too heavy. So I love to disentangle that. And I think that's so much a part of healing. So again, what that takes is deep listening. Because if I only, I don't know, do your pap smear, which is an important part of your healing, I have to know your cervix is healthy. And that's the speculum looking inside the vagina, micromanaging that beautiful organ called the cervix, and doing the tests that we know helps, the PAP and the HPV, and using the science around human papillomavirus and cervical cancer. I know all that, and it's so important. But I also have to know that when I take that speculum out, I need to take a look at your face. And when I see you weeping, I have to say, what are those tears about? It's bringing tears to my eyes. Because many, many women who come into the office have had trauma. I'm not taking care of them if I'm not addressing that. And I have no illusion. They may not share that with me the first time. They may not share with that the second time. But if I can ask the question of, does this make you afraid? Does this cause pain? Have you ever been hurt in this way? Are you feeling safe? And they may say, no, 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 no. But they know I'm thinking about it. They know I'm aware. So that when they come in the third or fourth time to see me for, I don't know, a yeast infection, what feels really, if you will, kind of simple in the grand schema of healing, that's when they tell me. So for me, again, healing is not just that microscopic, not just feeling the breast for a lump, not just doing a pap smear, not just writing out a script for an antibiotic, all of which is so, so critical. Please I don't underestimate the value of that. And I'm so privileged to have that information, to be able to share it, to be able to use it, to apply it. But it's also about looking at the more global human being, and that integrating that's what's so challenging, beautiful, human, and natural to me. It's just the way I see the world, which is, part of the challenge, because that's looking at it from a big perspective. That's the telescope really looking at the vast universe. And that's hard to grab hold of sometimes. And moreover, I don't have any illusion. Again, I can't do that. I certainly couldn't do it in my 15-minute appointments historically. Now, in my new practice where I can spend time with women, there's more time and spaciousness to do that. But again, it's a process. It's a process, and it's a relationship. For some women, they don't want me to look at the larger picture, and I respect that. I can see when boundaries are up, and I respect those boundaries. At the same time, I also make sure they're aware that I'm comfortable exploring them.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that is why you're an amazing healer, by the way.
Thank you.
From the microscopic to the telescope, and you are crying. And I think that is, maybe we talk a little bit about the muscle of empathy and its role in all this. And, where do your tears come from? Why does this evoke tears? It's so all of the new science about mirroring and neuro, back and forth and sharing stories and what that does for healing. Like, what about what you just said? I'm curious, evoked that tear response.
I think it's mostly, it's joy. Part of it's the joy.
Yeah.
I do cry with joy. As my kids say, I cry at everything and anything. I love to cry. But it's also about, there's a weightedness to the trauma that women have experienced over centuries and continue to experience. And for better or worse, I feel it. It embodies me, or it is embodied in me. So it's hard to carry that sometimes. I do it with, again, gratitude. And again, it's such a privilege. It's such a privilege, but it's heavy.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And such a gift to women that you carry it, that you hold it, that you receive it. You talked about the universal storylines. So everyone comes in, they have their own particular thing, but then you learn from the particular and you learn from the universal. Are there some universal themes in addition to the one that you just named, which is the heaviness of centuries of women's role, status, etc.? Are there other universals? Are there universal resilience, universal strength? Like, where are some of these through lines that pop through the particular?
Yeah. Well, if anyone out there has experienced a labor and delivery or been there and watched a labor and delivery, women have the most amazing capacity for grit, strength, perseverance, courage, beauty, reproduction. My gosh. And then what about the monthly menstrual cycle? For some of us, it's a beautiful dance. For others, it's a miserable, not such a fun dance.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what I see every day as well. Humor. Women are really fucking funny. Because they have to have a sense of humor about it because, again, I think all of us know the heaviness to our history and current life challenges. Capacity. I just have to say that over and over again because it's rare that a woman doesn't come in and talk to me about, if they're a partner, if they're a worker, if they're a community member, if they are supporting their children, they're supporting their parents, they're taking care of loved ones, they are trying to build friendships. It's like, I love the idea of when you were at the spaghetti dinner and you were trying to serve spaghetti, you were trying to be present as a new mom in a community that, values participation. You were trying to figure out, okay, who in this room can I talk to? And like, oh my gosh, how do I reconcile my gynecologist with friendship? It's like, okay, how many balls was that in the air? We're all doing it. Yeah. We're all doing it constantly. And so resilience, there's so many attributes that women carry that I admire, that I see woven into every single visit I have. Even when women come in and they are feeling weakened by illness, overwhelmed by life's demands, unsexy because they're aging, distanced from their partners, terrified of the surgery I'm about to do on them, with them, for them, all of that, there's still curiosity. Always, always curiosity, even if it's slightly or very consistently hidden by, language that's not asking the questions. It's always there. It's always there. And I can't help but think curiosity is a part of the evolutionary capacity to survive. If you're not curious about what's around the corner, you're never prepared for what's around the corner. I think women are always thinking about what's around the corner. Always. Which is also not an easy thing on a day-to-day basis. It's depleting, but it also can empower us.
That is such a beautiful explanation, or connect the dots to the title of this podcast. Connecting the dots between women's strength, curiosity, and what you're talking to people about on this show. I am still curious about what you just said about sense of humor, because it is really a joy to laugh with you. And we have had some very funny conversations about what it means to be a woman at different stages and the humor that comes along with, for example, as we age, let's just call it drying up, menopause. So we have adolescence, the beginning of menses, then, adulthood, where you're taking on so many responsibilities, and then you move into menopause. Like, can you share some funny things about those different life stages that you have shared with your patients, they have shared with you, that you have observed, you have lived through yourself? Like, we got to have a sense of humor about some of this stuff. You start when you're young, you've got lots going on down there, and these are the things we don't talk about, and why you say, like, somebody might not ask you the question, but there's a question in there. Let's hear a little bit of that from the kind of funny point of view, if you would.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's funny. Funny, no pun intended. I should have, I have a list at home of all of these quotes that people have said in my office, some of which are just kind of hysterical. And I'm going to twist it a little bit because I can't remember particulars, although what it's almost always about is taking something that's rather serious and making it kind of funny. So the one story I do remember, and I've written a little bit about it, is called the Booby Prize. And this is a woman who came in, this was a lot of years ago, so bear with my memory. And she had had a bilateral mastectomy. And she came in and she was talking to me about the experience. And I was serious because I'm a serious doctor, And I said to her, "So how's it going?" And she starts cracking up. I'm like, "Okay, what's so funny?" She said, "I had the biggest pendulous boobs and I hated them. They were so problematic. I could never find a bra. I could never wear a dress with cleavage. It was just, my life was spent trying to figure out how to get around my boobs." And so she says, "So I'm calling my mastectomies the booby prizes." And we just started cracking up because she was able, again, to take this story, the story of her cancer, the story of her mastectomy, both of which are not particularly funny subjects, right? And just find humor. So the drying, oh my gosh, the number of comments I've heard about the drying experiences of the vagina and the vulva in the menopause. I mean, it's interesting how often fruit come into mind. Women will talk about dried up fruit and in the most unexpected ways. So it's just the way, again, language, speaking out loud without reservation, and using humor as a healing modality, because we like laughing. It's good for us. Physiologically, it's good for us. It increases all those wonderful hormones that make us feel good, even if it's just for a moment. But it's more than that. It's a way of using stories, using language, using our deeply personal individual experiences, and finding moments of humor in them and sharing it. And I get to hear that. So I can't tell you. I mean, I remember I had this wonderful nurse, Becky, for years. And I'd come out of the office and she'd give me this look like, what's going on in there? And I knew it was almost always about when I was cracking up. when the patient and I like couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
And I'd come out and she's like, okay, what was the joke? And it was not even a joke. It was just a way of seeing their experience with lightness, with levity, with humanity that was laughable. That was joyful. That brought us pleasure in the face of hardship. So there's a lesson there, right?
Yeah.
There's a lesson there.
It's so beautiful to think about laughter. Like we talked about tears, but to think about the healing power of laughter, even in the midst of such challenging, troubling things.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of the time that you and I have spent laughing together has to do with parenting. So maybe, this maybe is the last question. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. But your kids helped you name this podcast. Not only did they give you the courage or the instruction, do it, they actually came up with the name. And I'm curious about how you feel about that. And if there's anything you want to say about your mothering and how your kids continue to help you grow and how you feel about the title of the podcast at this 100th conversation anniversary.
Yeah. So naming the podcast was really tough. I mean, I asked, everybody and his brother,
including me,
including you, absolutely, and everybody had
I did not win.
kind of
your kids won.
They won. They tend to. It was tough. I have to. It's somewhat analogous to when I had my own office and I had to pick the art for the office, and I have a strong sense of what art I like. Mm-hmm. But I realized that the art I liked was not necessarily the art that was for the common person walking into an office. And I wanted to make sure that art reflected a respect for everyone and was comfortable for everyone. And so, again, a lot of the titles that I came up with were provocative or what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't really speak to what you're going to speak to, like off tangent. I mean, it was kind of a fun process. And then when I was sitting with my kids and they said this name and I was like, GynoCurious. I mean, literally, I spent some weeks like resonating with it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a gynecologist and I'm curious. So kind of says what it kind of speaks to it. So it works. It works. I think that it still works for me. And, it's not as catchy as I had another show on that was part of GynoCurious called Vulva Views. And that was certainly, a little bit more provocative. And I loved it. And I still, speak to Allison on occasion and we laugh and we joke and we go deep, and that's wonderful. But yeah, no, it works. And my kids, first of all, I just want to put it out there. I think parenting is the hardest job I've ever experienced. I mean, it was harder than residency, really. And for a lot of reasons. And thank goodness I had friends like you who I could help, I could speak to about the hardships openly and honestly. All of you out there who are parenting, please find a person with whom you can speak honestly, openly, without shame about how hard it is, how you want to, throw your kids out the windows some days and other days you want to smother them with kisses and hugs. And it's confusing. The emotional roller coaster is just, it's a rapid one. And unlike any other relationship I've ever had. And yet, the despite that roller coaster ride that continues, it doesn't change. You never stop being the mother. What I'm learning again as I age is how to just listen better. And part of the beauty is I've learned on GynoCurious how to listen better. So that's kind of this full circle of they were part of the beginning. It's through this experience I've learned to listen better. And as a result, I'm listening to them better. And I've learned how to say, do you want me, when they call to lament something, I've learned how to say, do you want me just to listen or do you want me to help strategize? Because the other thing I used to do all the time was try to fix things. That's what I do. I'm a fixer. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I'm a doctor, right? And they didn't want that. Often they didn't want that. And so now I'm able to see that And they're able to say, oh, thanks. Okay, I just want you to listen today. Or no, need help strategizing. How do I go from A to B to C, whatever. And so, our families, whether it's our family of origin or our current families or our future families, I like speaking about epigenetics on GynoCurious because we are the reservoirs for so much information that we understand and we don't understand. And you and I have talked about this too. And I kind of love that. I love the not knowing because I'm curious. I wonder where that came from. Why am I afraid of this? Why do I enjoy that? I can't explain it. My intellect doesn't understand it, but I know that it's from some deeper place. And we have science to demonstrate that. That's not just, not just a false belief. It's science. Our genetics can be changed by our experiences and they go on to future generations. What a cool concept. So it's been a privilege, again, to kind of learn from my kids. Not always easy. It's humbling at times. It certainly, for me, has taught me about the importance of having a role that's not immutable. That like being their mom can shift and change over time as they shift and change. And that it doesn't take away the value of my being their mom. It doesn't take away my authority. I've just had more years on this earth, right? And I come with a different perspective that I think has value, that I know has value. But I've also learned how, again, to be a little bit softer in that role and to just be in a way, just more trusting and more relaxed about it. And that brings us back to the beginning of our conversation about my voice. And I think it's all part of it. It's this wonderful continuum of my own healing, my own process, my own growth, my own empowerment, and along a very rocky road in health and in illness, which I've had both of, parenting easily and through great hardship. I've had both. Through friendship and the loss of friends. All of these things. I think we all kind of live in an in-between space, some of us more comfortably than others. For me, that is my space. That is my nest. That is my home. And that is part of what feeds my intuition, my insight, my healing, my calling.
Well, I know I said that was the last question, but here's the last question. The last question is, after 100 episodes, is there something you have learned beyond all that you've shared? Is there anything you want to say very specifically about 100 episodes? Here we are, closing words on 100.
I'm shocked. I am like really like it, and it happened so fast.
Yeah.
And I love that Jen, my engineer, my producer who's sitting here, who has so lovingly been patient with all the ups and downs of this podcast and being a neophyte in the beginning and now being slightly less so. It's got a certain gravitas. And I kind of love that.
Nice.
I did it.
You did it.
And I hope to continue doing it. And most importantly, I hope that my doing it has empowered women out there, taught women out there, let them know they're not alone, that the stories that are shared, that's the goal, to create community, and community. And so, I hope to do more. I hope to evolve and change and learn. And I know there, again, some are going to be great and some of them not so. It's okay. I just value the doing it. So I hope that when we reach 200, Carla, you'll be my guest again.
I would be so honored. And just enormous congratulations and admiration and gratitude to Jen, who created this opportunity and stands with you, making it happen. Happy 100.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here with me. I'm grateful on so many levels. I'm also grateful to Jen Hammoud and Maddie Rosenberg, who have been my co-conspirators and co-producers on the show, and to David Hoffman, who helps edit these shows, and to the Epicurean, who so lovingly creates a nest for all of us here in Rhinecleft, New York. And again, to my listeners. This would be, for naught. It would be, I don't even know the words. I've lost all my words. All I can say.
That's because I asked you so many questions. Sorry.
I just want to say thank you. I hope this has been fun for you and brought you tears and laughter and insight and wisdom, and continue listening. And remember, rate the show. This is what I'm supposed to tell everybody. Share it on your social media. Help me be a producer, of which I am not so good at, because I want a lot of women to have access to this show. Carla, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.